Today we are making small batch French bread. It's crusty on the outside and soft and chewy on the inside. This bakery quality French bread is so easy to make. You're going to want to make it with every meal. Join me in the kitchen as we make small batch recipes with big taste. So besides how amazing this bread tastes, the other thing I love about it is it only takes under an hour to make. Now you can find my recipe for the full size French bread recipe, which makes 2 good sized loaves, down below. But today we're making a reduced size version, 1 loaf that'll feed up to 2 people. Now this bread does use yeast, and if you've never used yeast before and it kind of scares you, don't worry, I'm going to walk you through the process. So the first step is we're going to proof our yeast, which means we're going to activate it, okay? And we need a 1/4 cup of warm water. So now, yeast, first important thing, make sure your yeast is not expired. Check the date on the package. If it's expired, toss it. I like to store my yeast in the freezer because it helps to extend the lifespan of it. So check that expiration date. Number 2, water temperature. If your water's too hot, you're going to kill your yeast. If it's not warm enough, it's not going to activate. So we're going to use a 1/4 cup of warm water. You want the temperature to be like a nice warm baby's bath, about 105, 110 degrees, no higher than 115 degrees. So I've got my nice warm water in here. I'm going to take 1 teaspoon of dry active yeast. I'm going to add in 1/2 teaspoon of sugar. This kind of helps to get it going and activated. We're going to stir that up, and then we're going to let it sit for about 5-10 minutes if you need to let it get nice and bubbly and foamy and active. To help it along, I like to put a plate over the top, kind of creates a little bit of a warmer environment, and then we'll be ready to start the bread. All right, our yeast is nice and foamy. See that? It's ready to go, and we're ready to mix up our bread. So today we are going to use our stand mixer. You can totally mix this bread up by hand. It just takes a little bit more time and a little bit more muscle. So we're going to add in our flour, and we're going to add in 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. I just like to scoop and scrape. We got 1, 2, and then a 1/2. And I'm not real exact. I kind of eyeball that 1/2. There we go. And we're going to add in a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, right? 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Is that what I need? I'm going to check. Yes, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Got our 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then we're going to add in our yeast mixture. We're going to start mixing that up, and we're going to need to add in a little bit more water. Now, I've got about another 1/2 cup of warm. Make sure it's warm again. We don't want to put in cold or too hot of water. About a 1/2 cup more, and depending on your weather, today it's a really damp, rainy day in Portland. Sometimes I have to add in a little bit more water, sometimes I don't. You just want the dough to pull away from the sides of the bowl. It's still going to be a little tacky and sticky to touch. Okay, our dough's pulled away from the sides. It is still slightly sticky, kind of tacky to the touch. That's totally good. See right here, it's just kind of little tacky. We're going to take it out. We're going to spread a little bit of flour on our surface, and then we're just going to knead it a few times by hand. And I like just to take the palm of my hand, smush it, turn it, press it again, rotate it, and then just keep going all the way around. All right, after our dough is nice and smooth, nice and soft, we're going to form it just into a ball. And I'm going to take a bowl, a little bit of olive oil. We're just going to kind of coat the bottom of it. Then we will take our dough, and I put it down, just get that olive oil coating it, flip it and turn it, and then we're going to cover it with a towel, and we're going to let it rise, depending on how much time you have, for about 15 to 30 minutes. Find the warmest place in your house. One of my favorite places to let my dough proof is actually in my oven. You can just turn the light on in your oven and let it sit in there. And sometimes your oven may have a proofing setting, or sometimes I'll just turn it on to whatever the lowest is, like 150 degrees, let my oven preheat, then I turn off the oven and put the bread in and let it rise in there. It's going to rise faster and quicker in a warmer environment. All right, our bread has risen. It's about doubled in size. Looks so good. Eh? Now we're going to take a little bit of flour on our counter, take out our dough, and just kind of coat it with some flour there. And we're going to take a rolling pin and just roll it out into a triangle. Now, if you wanted two really mini kind of size loaves, you could totally divide this dough in half right now. I'm just gonna make one today. So we've got a rectangle, I don't know, that probably measures 8 by 6, something like that. And we're gonna roll it up. And then we wanna take the ends and kind of tuck them under, okay? Then we're gonna take a parchment lined baking sheet, and I'm gonna place my dough right on there. Make sure those ends are underneath. And then we're gonna take our towel again, and we're gonna let it rise one more time for about 15, 20 minutes, and then it's gonna rise also once we put it in the oven. So about, however, depending on how much time you have, I like to give it at least 15 to 20 minutes. All right, our bread has risen for the second time. We're ready to put it into the oven. You want to preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. But before we do it, we're going to take a nice sharp knife and we're just going to make 3 diagonal cuts into the top of the bread, about 1/4 of an inch deep. And then we're going to take a little bit of olive oil, drizzle over the top. Get it on there. I just like to kind of use my hands to coat it around the dough. And then I'm going to take some coarse French salt, gray salt, and just sprinkle. You could use any kind of flaky salt, a Maldon salt, even a flaky, coarser kosher salt. And this is going to give the bread just some extra flavor. And it is ready to go into our oven. Let me see, we're going to bake it at our oven for about 18 to 20 minutes until it's nice and golden brown. All right, so the hardest part of making this French bread is letting it cool before you cut into it. And to be perfectly honest, sometimes I don't let it cool. So it's ready, it looks gorgeous, it smells amazing. This bread is so easy that you are gonna wanna make it for every meal. You can just slice it up. Of course, all you have to do is add a little butter and you've got a delicious homemade bakery quality French bread. Be sure to check my other small batch bread recipes by checking down below, and I'll see you in the next video.